Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Three Cops Talk. This is Sean, one of your hosts, and I'm here with the Polish Fog yet again. He is joining us via a brand new microphone. About it looks of it, Chris. It's
No,
pretty
I got
cool.
one of those
I like
things
it.
because you kept telling me my or whatever it was.
Polish.
Yeah.
And
I thought it was just a pantyhose over.
I
the
thought it
front
was
of
my head was
actual
was
thing.
too big, but apparently it's my speech.
And then you heard the thrifty Norwegian. He's joining us yet again. This is a guy.
Shekel Scott.
Guns.
That's his new
We're
nickname. Two Shekel Scott.
The three of us can get together. Like I could wish I could start learning some like Norwegian curse words to just saying like other than oofta and things like that. But before we get on the show, everybody's making fun of my really gray beard. Like
so we're gonna announce our guest here in a minute.
It's majestic.
So if anybody's gonna watch a video, like you gotta watch like this video because you got one guy like you look at him like, God damn, that's a beard. And you look at Sean, you're like, man, bro, you need some of that, dye stuff or whatever.
Formula?
Just for men. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's just for men.
But
yeah.
What was kind of cool is that I went to a real barber like today. Like, they're not like real barbers used to be around all over the place, and then real barbers went away.
You mean a salon? Or an
no,
barber.
It was an actual barber shop. Like, really, you go in there and they have like they had 7 barbers running, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. And maybe someday I can get this place to be a sponsor because it was so cool. Really pro-military. They even had some law enforcement stuff hanging up in there. But when I sat down to get my haircut, the lady's like, I really like your beard. I was like, what? She opened with that on me. I was like, oh, really?
Wow.
That's cool. And then I get on here and I get disabuse is what it is.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever.
But
Strangers.
she was 104.
But look, she knew what she was doing.
Centrum Silver.
And it's the first time I've ever gotten a beard.
A compliment?
A compliment and a beard trim. And one thing I learned about getting your beard trimmed is like you're supposed to keep your mouth shut. She goes like, do this thing like so you roll your lips back in so she can get to the hair that's above your lips so you don't gash you open with it. I'm like, oh, this is cool. I never had this before. And my mouth's open and all the hair falls in my mouth. I'm like, oh, that's part of the thing I didn't quite realize happens right now. And it's great. I'm like, should I color? She's like, no, it looks way, way better. And I was like, oh, all right, that's kind of nice. And like I said, then I get here and I listen to this bullshit from you two.
No, that gray looks
No,
good.
it looks good.
You're
Looks
good.
good on you.
Yeah,
All
right. Anyway.
Yeah.
But it was neat to go and be amongst the people again and have somebody compliment me and not be locked in a room talking into a microphone with guys, whatever. Anyway.
Wow.
So what have you two been up to lately? Nothing, anything, whatever? Not getting your haircut? Not getting your beard trimmed?
Just getting my training done, getting back, getting ready to go to schools. That's about it, man.
Okay. You guys, because you're so much younger than me, you should check your underpants every now and then to make sure there's hairs coming in down there too. Chimps is what you are. But one of the things we're dealing with as a profession right now is the ability to influence people and kind of convince them, in a positive light, that is at least. And we've been talking a lot about like, where can we go to places where we can traditionally find people that are a positive influence in a lot of ways. And the police world has always been reluctant to go outside the police world. I'm a big fan of looking internally first to address things, but we have clearly reached an era where we definitely need more influence, particularly in the PR side of the house. Like if we could do a better job of like convincing people of why we do what we do as opposed to keeping things clandestine and secretive. And if we say this, it's going to offend them. If we say this wrong, it's going to seem this. And then, we become very cloistered and it is raised through generation after generation. Chiefs of police don't come from the business world. They come from the police world. And if you were raised in that environment, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, that's kind of what you adopt and adapt to. A cultural shift in law enforcement.
Because it's just like that, being in the military and we're all cops and stuff. They just don't like change.
Well, I mean, I honestly haven't done them both. I mean, and I didn't do it as much as some other people have. The military is pretty effective with change. I mean, you move a lot. You have to go to different theaters. You have to take different stations. At a certain point, you're taking different rank. Way more adaptable to change. Like we moved and we were like, oh man, moving sucks.
Right.
My college is a military college and we were moving, off campus, and my wife's like, this moving sucks. I go, you can't talk to anybody else on this block about how moving sucks. Everybody on this block's a colonel or a, general at the end of the street. They're going to laugh at you and go, you moved once in 20 years. Oh my God. That's rough. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it seems like in the police world though. Yeah. In the police world, someone comes up with an idea a lot of times, and it's like, okay, well, maybe it's something different. But then if it doesn't work, there never seems to be anything like, well, hey, why didn't that work? Now let's just come up with something else, you know?
Right.
And I just feel like there's a lot of
or you got to get a
turnover
committee
with that sometimes. Right. Yeah. I mean, some of the more effective leaders that I've seen in the police world have been the people who they make a decision, they execute it, they take the feedback from it, from the people who are the end users of it, and they either, adapt it or modify it. That I feel like has been some of the best change we've seen in our career path.
Yeah, and I think what happens is that's why, we're on our guest here in a second. I think that's why one of the reasons that, we're talking about, having influencers and stuff like that, like they have to take risks and they have to like see what's working and what doesn't work. And they have to, I mean, to me, looking from the outside in, they have to pivot and they have to stay current and a lot of stuff. And I just don't think from the police world, it just takes a lot of time to, I was never in the military, but it just seems like in the police world, it just takes a long time. And just like now, we're trying to build this bridge between the community and civilians and show what each other does to get along. And it just seems like when you try and do that stuff, it's like, they got to form a committee. I'm like, well, can't we just get people together and talk? Like, can't we just say, hey, let's put up a poster and say, hey, let's get together and chit chat about what you don't like. We could explain what we expect, and just we just can't talk, but they got to put a committee together or whatever. So, I mean, I think that's my perspective on it.
So you're not a fan of the bureaucracy, Chris? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm kind of like
bureaucracy associated with it. As a businessman, you can't possibly.
I've never experienced bureaucracy.
Bureaucracy on any level. We'd be considered mid-level bureaucrats in the big police state that we exist in. So, that being said,
so we are introduced our guest, and I always screw up his last name, Michael.
It's Sartain.
Sartain. I always say Sarah Satin, and I don't know why. It's got the little S.
That's your cholesterol medicine.
That's right.
right.
So anyway, so Michael, Michael, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time. And I know you're super busy, and I know you got a lot of things going on, personally and in your business and stuff. And I just wanted to thank the time, that you took to come here. So basically what we brought you on here for is we wanted to talk to some influencers and kind of get their feel on stuff and what it takes and how you did it and what you did. And then kind of towards the end of the show, kind of get your perspective on what you feel a lot of our influencers can do, because let's just face it, everybody watched them, whether you're, whether you're 5 years old or 7 years old or 10 years old, or, we got people here that are, about 60, 65. They're always on TikTok and they're always on Instagram and stuff like that. And unfortunately, my feeling is that that's where a lot of feelings and a lot of misinformation may get out, or not the whole story. So towards the end, we're kind of talk about like what we can do, from a social media standpoint, to kind of like maybe get out some better information. So anyway, so your story, your history, I could never do it any justice. So I'm just going to leave it up to you, Mike, to give us your history, your story, and how you got to where you're at.
Man, this is always scary every time people ask me for my bio, because it's like, I can't even explain it. I always forget things. Right. So I went to high school at went to high school in Dallas, Texas. It was a really interesting experience where I grew up on the north side of the tracks and went to high school on the south side of tracks. So I went to a really, really bad high school. There were a lot of police officers there. We were the first high school with metal detectors. There were frequent shootings. I used to work, I was a lifeguard in South Dallas. If you guys have ever been to South Dallas, it's not back then, it's getting better now, but it was not a super fun place to live during the crack epidemic in the early 90s. Right. And I would sit there with police officers often, and I would ask them frequently about their job. I would go for ride-alongs when I was like maybe 16, 17 years old. And it was just something like, for me, I got to see growing up, like how both sides live. Because I lived in Lakewood, which is a nice area of Dallas, but I went to high school at like probably amongst one of the worst public school districts in the country was DISD.
Really? Oh, really?
So now we in a situation where I finished really high up in my class, but I didn't really get that good grades. I went to UT Austin. I studied business, and then I had a minor in astronomy. And then from there, I left and couldn't find a job because MCI WorldCom and Enron went out of business around the same time. And so I'm getting an IT degree from one of the best business schools in the country, but there's no jobs. So as a joke, I used to manage a bar, or like I was the door guy at a bar, and I was the DJ there. And one of the waitresses, she goes, "Hey, we need a DJ at our strip club." And I was like, come on, this is a joke, whatever. But I needed a job. And I was like, all right, I'll go into the strip club during the daytime, Sunday
I
daytime.
guess.
I guess. So I go in there Sunday daytime, and it was listen.
It was Chippendales.
Okay, a whole nother story, man.
I'm kidding.
Let me keep that thought. Keep that thought.
Yes, sir.
So I go with Sunday daytime, right? And for those of you, I don't mean to disparage anyone, but like the girls are not as pretty on Sunday daytime as they are on Friday night. And so it wasn't like a dream come true, right? I'm sitting there working a strip club during Sunday daytime. And I didn't think they'd give me the job, and I got it. And so I ended up speaking on the microphone for 8 hours a day for 4 years. And so a lot of the stuff that I do now with the podcast and my coaching program, a lot of it came from those 4 years. I know it sounds insane, but the 4 years of me being a DJ at a strip club was invaluable to me.
Right.
Because the other thing that was crazy about it is that I'm also like the offensive coordinator for the strip club, right? I got to figure out like which girls go on where or whatever, right? I'm a former high school. I'm a former high school football player, right?
Right.
And I'm trying, and I have to, and then so here it becomes this really crazy situation where I have a bunch of extremely unaccountable women that are in the locker room who are like bickering and fighting, and I have to like lead them so that we actually get them on stage on a regular basis. And I'm on the microphone for 8 hours. It's funny how, when I think about it now, how that ended up like working in my favor. Yeah. So I knew this wasn't what I wanted to do. I watched 9/11 happen literally while I was at the strip club. I go into work early, and so I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the replay. Obviously, it wasn't live because it would have been 9 a.m. That would have been 6 a.m. my time. And at first I'm just kind of in disbelief. And I knew a B-52 previously, because I was a military buff. I knew a B-52 had previously flown into the Empire State Building. So I thought maybe this was something similar where there was just some sort of aeronautical accident. Then the second one hits. Right. And then at that point, I'm like, oh, wow. I can't even contemplate what's going on. Right. When the towers come down, and then I have 2 frat brothers. I was in a Christian fraternity in college, which is funny. I ended up working in a strip club. So
great place for a reunion.
Like mission work. It was mission work for you. You've been very
one of my frat brothers, he ends up flying heavies for the Navy. And then one of my frat brothers, he ends up being an EA-6B navigator for the Marine Corps. And so they both became flyers. So I ended up going to the Air Force, and then I tell them I want to be an intel officer. I didn't want to fly. I didn't particularly enjoy flying. And they made me a flyer because I scored really well on the pilot nav section. So I ended up joining. I go in there, and it was just a situation where I wanted to serve my country. I knew I wasn't. If you were a DJ at a strip club, that's a job you just keep for 30 years. If you guys ever go to the strip club, go to one in Texas or Georgia and go back there and look at the Friday night guy. He's probably 5'9", weighs 245 pounds, put 3 of his grandkids through college. You know what I'm saying? He's been there for 35 years.
He's got a pension.
Yeah. I mean, and I was just like, I don't want to be that guy. Shout out to Tony Q at the men's club in San Antonio, Texas. The guy was there for 30 years.
Not a sponsor, by the way. Not a sponsor.
Nah. And I was like, I don't want that life. So I joined the military. And when I did, I studied astrophysics. I had a business degree, and I joined the military, and it was one of these situations where the math made sense. So I was a navigator. They wanted me to apply to be a pilot. I had no interest in being in the military for 11 years to be a pilot. 7 years was long enough for me. And so I ended up joining. And then when we have all the choices for the airplanes that we want to fly, everyone's like, oh, I want B-52s or F-15s, or I want B-2s. And I'm like, no, which one has the longest runway and a bathroom inside? And they were like, KC-135.
Right, there you go. Right.
I was like, it's an air refueler. And the thing is, for being a navigator on a KC-135 actually is the hardest job out of all of them, because I'm responsible for my air refueling and yours, right? I have to do your timing, because a lot of other aircraft don't have navigators. I have to do your timing, and I have to do my timing. I have to do your fuel calculations, and I have to do mine in the air going 600 miles an hour. So that's why I liked the job. It was a lot of really quick math. It was very enjoyable. We could only land on 10,000 feet of runway, and we always had a bathroom. There's a bathroom in the aircraft. In fact, you could go in the back and take a football. The cargo hold was so big, we could sit there and throw a football. Me and the crew chief, the boom operator, would throw a football in the back, while we were flying sometimes. And so it was a good time. I loved it.
For our listeners,
sleep.
Real quick, the boom is the thing that refuels the other plane. So that comes out, and you got to marry that
the male end. The male end that goes into
male end, and that helps for the strip club too.
Which is the opposite for the Navy, because they use a drogue. Let's give a little history lesson. In 1957, the U.S. government commissioned Boeing to make a Boeing 707 into what's called a KC-135 stratotanker. It had one job, which is to refuel B-52s on nuclear missions to go nuke Moscow. That was the only job that it had.
There you go.
And it ended up being the situation where they were just going to use it and then throw it away. Well, the aircraft was so robust, just like the B-52. Boeing used to make the best aircraft in the world, without a doubt, back then. So the B-52 was made in the early 50s, the KC-135 in like the late 50s. And so these aircraft were so robust. We're still flying, guys, just for people who don't know, we're not flying new KC-135s. The KC-135s that are flying now were built in 1957. My seatbelt was from the Korean War. My fan was rusted. It was from Vietnam. I'm not kidding. The avionics were all new.
Let's go back to that gray beard thing again, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Gray beard thing again, you know what I'm saying?
It's funny. It was funny. So anyway, the aircraft was made for one job, to refuel B-52. Well, the entire Air Force aircraft inventory started using it. When I say refueling, we pull up in front of them. We pull up 1 mile ahead and 500 feet above where they are, and then they slowly come up into pre-contact, and then the boom operator flies the boom into the receptacle on top of the receiver. For the Navy, it's the opposite. We actually put a drogue out the back, and the Navy pilot flies his probe into the drogue and then receives gas. So we would do that for every, I have seen every aircraft up close, flying. It was a really, really cool gig because there's a big window out the back of the aircraft. And we could also do some stuff with search and rescue because we have like such a big window underneath the aircraft. And also because we were able to transport troops, because we could hold probably 50, 60 troops at one time. And so we would ship troops back and forth to the AOE sometimes. So, it was a really cool gig. I did that for a while. Once I became a senior captain, I stopped flying. That's generally what happens when you're a flyer. Once you become a major, you stop flying as much. My lieutenant colonel maybe flew like once a month if he was lucky.
Yeah.
And then I became a counterintelligence officer for like my last year in the military. And then I got out. And when I got out, I ended up moving to Las Vegas. This is the part you guys were asking me about. And when I moved to Las Vegas, I ended up randomly I remember I'd been DJ at a strip club for 4 years, right? So I ended up coming to Vegas, and this guy asked me one time, he's like, we're doing a fashion show at this one bar. Would you like to come and be the MC? And I was the MC, and I just made people laugh like the whole time. And so from that, I would MC another event and then another one. And then there was I don't know if you guys ever been to Hard Rock before. It was the Virgin Hotel. It used to be called Hard Rock. Rehab, the pool there had a bikini competition for about 70 grand. And they needed new recruiters and they needed a host. So they invited me to be the host. And then from that job, I ended up getting a job with Maxim, being the host of their parties. And from that job, I ended up getting a job with Babes in Toyland. And then the second year when I was at Rehab, then I met Crystal Hefner, Hugh Hefner's wife. So then I started working with Playboy. And then from there, it just like grew to where I was a recruiter for all these different events. And I was the MC for all these events at the same time. And then at the same time, I'm also working for a hedge fund. I'm a quantitative analyst at a hedge fund, which is funny. It's the same kind of math, doing air refueling math, which is pounds of gas per hour, weight and balance of the aircraft, direction, time, space, altitude, all these mathematical equations. When it comes to trading, it's actually the same part of the brain, right? It's like bid ask spread, right? Volume. It actually is kind of similar the way the whole thing works. So I got into trading probably around 2013. I ended up working for a fund probably in 2018, and I've been working for them for the last 4 years. And so I was doing that for a while. Then the pandemic hit and we were not making a lot of money. So then I started my own coaching program, which was a lot of the stuff that I learned when I was in the military and a lot of stuff I learned while I was hosting all these events. And a lot of stuff I learned from running different businesses and a lot of stuff. But the thing that most people were asking me about were the girls, because I mean, you guys have seen on my social media, there's just so many huge female influencers that are on my show or come on to my events. That's what people wanted to know about. So I started a program a couple of years ago about that called Men of Action, and it's pretty good, man. We've got about 400 clients right now. And we're growing pretty strong. So that's kind of the quick and dirty. I know I missed about 500 things in there, but that's pretty much what I've been doing.
Plug right now for the Men of Action type of thing. So since we're this early in the show, so hopefully people won't drop off. But could people join? Could people?
Yeah. So you would go to MOA Mentoring. I mean, you could pull it up if you wanted to on screen share. But if you go to moamentoring.com, you can see it. The 4 main pillars for the first Men of Action course is social networking, and then it's entrepreneurship, and then leadership. Leadership is the most important. I tell the guys who join my course, a lot of them join because they want to just have higher status and meet more women. And I'm like, you think that it's the social networking aspect of it. It's not. The leadership portion, which is a lot of Jocko Willink, a lot of UCMJ, not UCMJ, but the code of conduct. I will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor will I tolerate anyone amongst us who does. And I tell them, excellence, service before self, or I'm sorry, integrity first, service before self, and excellence we all in all we do, which is what we say in the U.S. Air Force. I make these guys say that. Also, we under promise, over deliver. It's always our fault, even when it's not our fault. Those are the things that actually make you an attractive, accountable man. Those are the things that do it. It's not the fake paddock watch and the social media followers and all that stuff. Those are the things that you're able to run a business and maintain relationships with people for 10 years when you can do those kind of things with your business. So that's what I teach my guys. The last module was called mindset, where we go into like, an abundance mindset. I make them read the subtle art of not giving a fuck. There's 20 books, 26 books that they have to read. Yeah, it's a great.
That is a great
listen.
Right?
No, that's a great listen.
Yeah.
That's a great book to listen to.
Also, then there's a second part called MOA Advanced, and there we go into Dr. David Buss, who's one of my guests. We go into evolutionary psychology about how the whole human race is basically their predilections all come from evolution. And then we go into things like sociopathy, narcissism, borderline personality disorder. We get really deep into that because, like, we talk about people getting scammed. We get into critical thinking. There's a bunch of different stuff. It's the what I'm trying to think the best way I can say it. It's what they want versus what they need. My course is sold very much as this networking. Hey, you want to live this lavish lifestyle like Dan Bilzerian or Andrew Tate or whoever. And then once you take the course, it's very much like, we need to build you up as a complete human being so that you can someday be worthy of these people that you want to network with. And there's no fake it till you make it. Integrity and honesty are the only thing that matters, because 10 years from now, you still want to be able to sleep. You still want to be able to lay your head down and not feel guilt. So that's basically what the course is in a nutshell. It's about 900 hours long, guys. I'm not gonna lie to you. Wow. The actual course itself is about 56 hours long, the first one. The second, of course, is somewhere in the 60 hours or whatever, but with all the Q&As, and because I do 4 group calls per week, it ends up being about 900 hours. And that doesn't include the podcast, which is also part of the course. So it's probably, from everyone I've talked to, it's the most comprehensive. I teach it like a master's course. Like you're getting a master's degree. That's the way I teach the course. There are actual modules. You have homework assignments, stuff like that. And we've never had a refund. I'm at 370 clients and I've never had a refund. I've had two guys that were trying to steal the program, like record it and then sell it and then try to get a refund. But I've never actually had like a legitimate person ask for a refund.
There you go.
Wow.
And now you're successful when people are trying to steal your stuff and sell it.
Yeah. A lot of people. Today I'm on my 14th fake account that I'm trying to get people to ban. Like, people keep making fake accounts of my Instagram, and I have to keep posting, please report this. I have a bunch of people that I asked to report my accounts because, it's gotten to the point where, like, you just get to a certain point and then all of a sudden it's like somebody keyed my car the other day. You get to a certain point and then all of a sudden there's some people that just don't like what you're doing.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. So, I mean, and this is kind of like what we were talking about earlier when I was talking to Scott and Sean, that you have this course, and the course, when you look at it, it's like, to meet these people and to live like these big lavish whatever, these minor goals. But when I looked at it, I'm like, to me, it's just being a decent human being and reaching your goals.
Chris, but a decent human being reaching their goals was what you and I learned when we were growing up, and we didn't have an iPhone when we were in elementary school.
Right.
That fundamentally is the difference, and why the course needs to exist is because this fundamental understanding that you and I had, like, again, I'm talking to 3 cops about this, so it's probably not the best example, but in Texas, when I was growing up, we would get into big fist fights in a bar, and guess what happened? The next day, we'd go back to the same bar. No one would give a shit. You go get your credit card back. No one called the police. No one pressed charges. And none of it was personal. And if you had a problem with somebody, you told them to their face. It was a very, very different time. Right. And so now the very thought of anything like that happening. No, instead now we look at Machine Gun Kelly in a pink dress, or, Tekashi 6ix9ine snitching to the feds. And like, that's what masculinity looks like now. And so it's very confusing for a lot of men, which is why a lot of times this course, I felt like this course was necessary.
See, go ahead.
We all got, when you're questions.
I know, it's like, I mean,
we'll clean it up in post.
Much to take it.
To say that.
Let's go 3 hours, man.
Your course. I was looking at a lot of your stuff on all your social media, and I saw all those different things about your program. Do you have any kind of like a screening process, or are there people that maybe are coming for the wrong reason? Do you have to talk to them at the beginning and say, hey, maybe this thing isn't for you?
Yeah, there's a couple of problems that people have. Like, I don't specifically have a problem if you want to use the course for dating. Everyone's dating life will improve if you take the course. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, it's pretty obvious that happens, but it's not a dating course. And unfortunately, what happens is a lot of guys from the like really toxic, like red pill, not that red pill all is toxic, but a lot of guys from that community are toxic, and they try to creep in and they try to like, hey, Michael, teach me how to throw these events so that I can use this as lead gen for women to have sex with. And I'm like, bro, that's not what I teach. That's not exactly what I teach, so that comes to be a little bit problematic. The main ones that I have an issue with are the people who don't want to work. So this is not a do it for you course. If this was there are DFY courses that you can buy. I would charge $100,000 a person if this was a DFY course. There's no way I'm going to do this. Like, I'm here and you're going to work your ass off. You need to look at me as your military training instructor or a signpost. I am not going to hold your hand through these different things, and no one's going to come save you. Right. So that's one of the things. The guys who don't want to work, they generally don't do as well. Or they just want the quick answer. And then the other guys, like I said, anyone who has any sort of like nefarious understanding or any level of misogyny whatsoever, you are quickly removed from my course. The problem is, like, this is a part that a lot of people don't understand, because there's so many influencers right now that talk about dating, male influencers, and they say some very like misogynist things about women, and they do it, and the guys get all riled up and like, yeah, let's go buy his course, all this kind of stuff. And for me, I host Swimsuit USA's World Championship. I host the biggest bikini competition in the world, the Playboy Summer Search. I host the Babes in Toyland charity event, which is for human trafficking and animal rescue. There's no way, if I was a misogynist person, I would ever get the ability to host these things, or Crystal Hefner would ever invite me to the Playboy Mansion. And so I was explaining this to my sales team. We're never going in that direction, not only because it's bad business, but because I love women. And so we're never going to. So any level of misogyny is quickly removed from my program. That's one thing that's really important to me. And I have female coaches. I have women that come on and they express, usually they're like fantastically beautiful, like Instagram models or whatever. And they'll come on and they'll explain, hey guys, when you do this, it's fucking creepy. Please stop doing it. Stuff like that. Like stuff like that. And it's really influential.
But you need that. I mean, that's a big part of it.
But
I mean, you need to get their input on that. I mean,
gut punch right there. Yeah, right. Exactly.
I mean, it is. Go ahead.
Okay, the one question for you that you were talking about the women and things like that, and guys that look at this, they go, well, what came first? Was it the business model or was it the women? And those pretty women, they got you in the game, or did you get in the game and they came later? Like that kind of a thing, like talking about that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So it was 14 years of me like studying self-help, giving speeches, and then hosting events for free. Especially anytime anyone wants me to host a charity event, I never let them pay me. Or if they want to pay me, I tell them to just give the money to the charity. So that's generally how it works. There's a anti-bullying charity I work for. They offer to pay me. I just tell them to give the money to the charity. So for the charity events, I don't take any money. The bikini competitions I do just because I have a staff that I have to pay in order to get stuff done for the bikini competitions. But for the most part, no, it definitely wasn't the business model first. I was doing this for 12 years before I ever started turning this into any kind of financially incentivized thing whatsoever. So no, it was one of these situations where I moved to Vegas and I watched a bunch of men here treat women like cattle. And I was like, is there a way for me to have an incredible time, an incredible network, incredible social circle here without treating women like cattle? And I was like, what if I just like started having a ton of female friends that would come to my events, that would introduce me to other females, that would get me into other events, that would introduce me to other influential people. Dude, I know I know several billionaires now, and it's always a female who introduces me, always. I have one female friend of mine, Toy. She's constantly introducing me to guys worth hundreds of millions of dollars that want to like sponsor my events. And that's the reason why. Is like what happens is these guys like start thinking, well, I can't network with these women or I don't take them seriously. So I did this whole thing, from that standpoint, we're like, what, I also don't want to be an asshole to women. I want to be really respectful. So how can I do that and still not get walked over? And one of the things that I found is that like when I go to a club with like 100 girls, I never have that issue where girls are like trying to walk all over me. I know it's like a long roundabout way to do it, but pre-selection is one of the things. Dr. David Buss in his book calls it the mate copying strategy, which is the idea that women are attracted to men who other women are attracted to. And it makes a lot of sense. So that was just something that I expressed to my clients. And so my clients, got on board with it. And that's one of the things that I do to like kind of help my clients as far as their networking is concerned.
Because I mean, I imagine you've probably like come across in this kind of work and putting this program together, you've probably come across guys with a ton of money who think that just because they have a ton of money, they can get whatever they want and do whatever they want. I'm sure, right?
Yeah, those guys generally don't make it too far in my course. Because the problem is like we very much talk about entitlement and you don't deserve shit. And so like that doesn't work quite as well.
Right.
That doesn't work. You know, was it Clint Eastwood who said deserve ain't got nothing to do with it?
Right.
So it's like, you know, it's one of these things where I don't like that level of entitlement. They will get scolded in front of the rest of the class because my group calls are like 60, 70 guys. There's no that we don't do that. I consistently remind them just like things like, dude, there was no antibiotics before 1930. There was like before 1850, half the world's population died before the age of 5. Like, and then during the 19th century, 100 million people died of famine in China. Like stuff like that. 60 million people died from the Spanish flu, and like 60% of the Earth's population was killed because of bubonic plague in the 15th century. Like I tell them things like that, and then like, you think you have fucking problems? You don't have big problems. Those your problems are not that big, dude.
It's
not that big.
Exactly.
Right. So I have to explain to them like that. It's like, far more people died from influenza during World War I than did during actual combat and stuff like that. You know, I explained to them like, this is the world you live in. You think that the world's always been like this. No, you've had 300,000 years of Homo sapien evolution and 10 years of Facebook, and you're confused and you think that the Facebook is the way things always were.
Right.
And you have to consistently remind them, no, evolutionary psychology is the reason why you think you find attractive women attractive, why you like sugar, salt, and fat, and why you tend to follow people with deep voices who seem like they know what they're fucking doing. That's the reason why, is because of evolution. And so, I mean, that's just some of the stuff that I teach. But you know, it's for the most part, it's like I want to leave these guys better than I found them, and I want to make them complete human beings. We do have a few females. There's 11 females in the course, and then we also, the other thing I want to make absolutely sure is that like I do have 2 clients that are male homosexuals. I have 1 female lesbian client. There's no evolution is evolution. Like it's status is status is status. It doesn't make any difference what your sexual preferences are. You know, but that's just one of the things that I want to bring out. I'll give you a great example. A lot of people are blown away by this, right? When men cheat, women ask, do you love him? Do you love her? Do you love her? Generally, this is from Dr. David Buss. When men cheat, when women cheat, men ask, did you fuck him? Right? These are generally the first question. Here's what's crazy. When lesbian women cheat, lesbian women ask, do you love her? When homosexual men cheat, homosexual men ask, did you fuck him? Men are men, women are women.
Right.
It doesn't make any difference what your sexual preference is, because evolution is the same. And it's a really fascinating study when you see that we are generally all the same. We are generally all we are. A lot of people don't like when I say this, hairless murder apes, and we're the function of human evolution. So when you look at it like that, then all of a sudden you start to ask questions. And I know I'm skipping ahead here.
No, you're good.
John Douglas, he wrote the book Mindhunter. He was one of the guys who formed the behavioral science unit at the FBI in 1974. Yeah. And so one of the things that I study a lot, mainly because of Dr. David Buss's book called The Murderer Next Door that he wrote, and then also Dr. Martha Stout's book, which is called The Sociopath Next Door. They start talking about where sociopaths come from and how violent sociopaths are born or whatever. You know, I'm sure you guys have been taught the triad. What is the injuring animals, the pyromancy, and then some sort of like sexual trauma with their mother or something like that. Right. And that's how you end up with Ted Bundy and Ed Kemper. And that's how those type of situations. It's not just sociopathy. It's sociopathy mixed with some level of trauma. And then you end up killing a bunch of people. And that's where that stuff kind of happens. So one of the questions we like to ask in the course is where do sociopaths, and you as police officers have to deal with this frequently, because a vast majority, an incredibly high number of violent offenders, violent felons are sociopaths. The one of the questions you have to ask yourself, how does this happen? Or where does something like this fit in evolution? Why would there still be sociopaths after 300,000 years? And the answer is, from an evolutionary standpoint, there had to be someone in my tribe who saw the other tribe and was willing to go in there and bash their heads in with a rock and not have nightmares about it. There was an evolutionary necessity for that level of cruelty in order for my tribe to survive and your tribe to not survive. And the U.S. military, there's officers, the generals in the military have made quotes about this. It's like they look for individuals with that type of temperament to become snipers that do not see other people as humans, and like there's useful individuals. So you ask these questions: why do these individuals exist? And then you see when they get malformed or they get mistreated, and then you end up with like serial killers and stuff like that. It's a very interesting thing to understand, because one of the things we talk about on my podcast frequently, because my podcast is about evolutionary psychology, it's not so much about dating. One of the things we talk about frequently on the podcast is that the difference between a bad person and a psychopath. This is a huge, huge problem. Like, for instance, a bad person cheats on her husband, a psychopath or a narcissist with cluster B personality disorder, shits in Johnny Depp's bed. Right. There's a big difference.
We covered that on the show here. We did. We did.
There's a big difference between those two things. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you're dating a woman with borderline, if you're dating a woman who's insecure, she breaks up with you because she thinks you're cheating on her. If you're dating a woman with borderline personality disorder, she fucks your dad and your brother and your friends to get back at you, and you didn't even cheat on her. So like there's these big differences when we deal with neurological disorders, and it's one of the things that I really like try to pass along to a lot of my clients is like a lot of times you're dealing with somebody who's gaslighting you or a narcissist or something like that. And it's really important to understand. And you guys, as a police officer, I'm sure you have to deal with this constantly. You know, you deal with this type of situation.
Well, see, so here's the question. So the question is based on evolution and all this other stuff. What we're seeing now, all the attacks on policemen where people just don't care. Like they're shooting cops, like sitting in their squad car in front of, in front of thing. And you know, and you see this and there's no remorse for it. Is that evolution or is that just bad people?
No, this is a fun, like at the tip of the spear, the people who are leading some of these charges are in a lot of cases narcissists. We're talking about the tip of the spear. We're in there's also studies that show a great number of members of Congress and the Senate are also narcissists, like narcissistic personality disorder, cluster B personality disorder. Mm-hmm. A lot of the times it's like, if I want justice because a family member of mine I thought was killed unjustly, that's a normal reaction to have, to then go out and then like use that as a victim mentality in order to raise funding for my political party. Or now we're getting into a completely different thing where we're using victim mentality in order to change the narrative. The reality of the situation is like, well, let's go to a couple of things, right? The attack on police officer was one of these things where it was just like, there was this, let's step way back. 2007, the Facebook app is put on the iPhone. There's a great book about this called The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt. What happens is that group in 2007, they're in junior high. By the time they graduate from college, they have created what we call now cancel culture. This is around 2014. These people do not want to hear opposing points of view. These are the people trying to cancel Joe Rogan. These are the people trying to cancel Dave Chappelle. They don't want to hear opposed. So if you go and you speak on their campus, like let's just say you had people from Police Officers Association going to speak on a campus where there's a bunch of liberal people like at Berkeley or whatever. It's not that they would debate you. They would simply physically try to intimidate you from coming on the campus and speaking. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
Because this is what they're taught. They're not taught to engage in open debate because they're not taught in any way whatsoever to face people openly or to express themselves openly. It's never an engagement of ideas. It's always just like my way or the highway. I'm spoiled, and it's just filled with hate. You with me so far?
Yeah.
Now you take this same group, and of course, it's not all people who are doing this. Like it really, there were some people who were genuinely outraged by some police brutality that they saw. And I'd say the majority of people were in that area. The problem that happened was that the people at the tip of the spear were not doing this for justice. They were literally doing this to raise money and for their own narcissistic behavior. And we found, by the time we find out that Black Lives Matter, the organization, not the movement, the organization was actually funneling money into their own pockets and stealing money. By the time that happens, we're 2 years past George Floyd, and we don't even go back and look at the repercussions of it. Okay.
Right.
So it's one of these situations where there were a bunch of people marching that had really good intentions, and they were correct in their feelings, and there needed to be changes. And at the same time, there was a group of people leading those individuals by the nose, and they were doing so in a way that was only self-serving. I agree with a lot of the things that Kaepernick was trying to say. I don't believe that Colin Kaepernick is a genuine human being at all. I think he completely was doing what he was doing for him. Completely self-serving. Dude, that whole thing he did where he was supposed to go to a tryout with an NFL team and then he went 10 miles down the road was one of the most deceitful, self-serving things that I've had. I was with him until he did that. And then I realized, oh, this is all just for your own benefit. Right. Okay, now I understand. So these are two different things that we have to deal with. I can be in favor of a movement and not in favor of the narcissists that run the movement. So it's one of those type of situations. With the case of what you're talking about, it's a very reductive behavior. Like I said before, we're not going to listen to other people's point of view. I'm right and you're wrong. So in the situation with police, it's like it's very difficult for them to understand. No, we're talking about 1% of police are bad, or even if we're 5%, it's definitely not the majority of police officers. And then you end up in situations like I forgot that individual who got shot 7 times in the back. And I remember afterwards thinking, like, this is a poorly trained officer for several different reasons, firing on somebody with the kids in the car. But like, guys, no offense to anyone, that guy wasn't a Marine. You want to know how I know he wasn't a Marine? Because there ain't nobody I'm going to shoot 7 times and they're going to get back up. It's like, to me, that was one of the craziest parts of that whole story. I was like, this guy got shot 7 times at that range by a police officer. Guess who was not trained proficiently on his weapon?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is another part, like we're completely missing when it comes to this kind of stuff. Now, if he's not trained proficiently on his weapon, what else is he not trained proficiently on? And now we get into this situation, defund the police. Well, the problem is we need, the most important thing is to be able to train to de-escalate these situations. That's what these are for. The U.S. military is not there to de-escalate situations. That's what diplomats are for, right? When we call the U.S. military in, it's already too late. Right. It's already too late. So now we have a situation here where police officers have to be mental health professionals. They have to deal with homeless. They have to deal with people who are violent. And then a lot of people who are not violent. They have to deal with people who are completely innocent while they're surrounded by other people who aren't. And so there's just all these mix of situations that make it extremely difficult for people. And then you don't see what's going on. And then what happens is, we do see examples where there is police brutality. And of course, we're going to see it because it has been a problem. I'm not saying it was a problem with you, gentlemen, but there were situations, you guys have probably seen it before. It doesn't help you. No offense, and I know it's probably going to piss some people off. Daryl Gates was not a benefit to the Los Angeles Police Department. Some of the stuff he was enforcing, some of the, like, for instance, the procedure of putting your knee on somebody's neck was enforced while Daryl Gates was the commissioner for the Los Angeles Police Department. This is not something, in fact, in Minnesota, that was not an illegal hold that they were doing on it. Now, to do it for that long, obviously, was ridiculous. But the problem is we get into these situations where it's like you have police officers that want to protect and serve their community, and then you have a small group of individuals that lead them off the wrong path. And then how do you counteract that? With other people who are just as misinformed about the situation, and then things get really ugly. Again, I'm going to skip ahead. You were going to ask me before about like what the solution is. Have you guys seen that police officer who comes out there and like does the dunk videos? He like dunks with the kids. And there's another one who like plays basketball. Have you seen that one video? One of my favorite videos. This guy pulls this other dude over as a police officer. He goes, "Why were you doing 90 and a 30?" Have you guys seen this one?
No.
Goes, "Yo, man, why are you doing 90 and a 30?" He goes, "Because I'm in the hood." He goes, "Yeah, that's a good goddamn reason. It's dangerous here." He goes, and then the officer looks at him and he goes, "You got a gun in the car?" He goes, "No, officer." He goes, "Well, hold on. Let me go get you one. This is a dangerous fucking neighborhood." Hard to get the guy a gun. Like stuff like that. Yeah. Like I know, listen, no one's going to listen to me, but the reality is, again, the majority of violent offenders are in what age group? You guys know. What age group? They're not 55 years old. What age group?
No.
18 to 25.
18, late teens, early 20s.
They're in this TikTok generation. Right. Okay. You guys are going to ask me, how do you change this? This is the answer. Those guys doing those funny videos, it is doing more good than probably anything else, right? Like if I worked in a neighborhood, like if I lived in Bankhead or if I lived in South Dallas and I was working in a neighborhood like that, I would try to every day create funny TikTok videos with people in my community and try to get people on there for us to share. Like it is really hard for somebody to draw down on a police officer that they know personally. Do you understand what I'm saying? Or who has done stuff in the community, or who has come and brought, helped out with your mom when she was trying to move, or something to that effect, where that person is actually trying to affect in the community. And if you can show this on social media, you can change the narrative. Because one thing that I found out about this generation, this youngest generation, this generation that's coming into power, this generation that's in TikTok, right? That's this TikTok generation, if you will. One of the things that I've noticed is while their attention is strongly on things and they get outraged very quickly, they get unoutraged just as quickly.
Right.
This narrative about police officers could be changed extremely fast if there was an organized effort by police officers to take some control on social media and make law enforcement a funny thing. Dude, that moron in Detroit, the one who keeps talking about disarming people with guns, the overweight black dude. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I mean, that's like, okay. Like not that, because I think that makes officers look bad. That not him, but like in general, that kind of content is so like if you had police officers reacting to that stuff and just laughing their ass off, that would be funny. That is stuff that would go viral. And the other part about it is, especially with Instagram and Instagram Reels and TikTok, that is the most scalable way for you to change this. Public service announcements by government officials don't do fucking anything for that generation of violent offenders that we were just referring to before. Yeah. TikTok videos and Reels do. And while that may be insulting for some people who are older, so I don't want to make TikTok videos. This is the way. I run a 7-figure business almost entirely off Instagram Reels and TikTok.
Mhm.
The eyeballs are all there. They're not watching Seinfeld anymore. They're not watching NBC News anymore. They're only watching TikTok and Instagram. Dan Bilzerian right now. Go ahead.
What one point I was going to make, I was going to say, like when you're talking about that with law enforcement and social media, I mean, we've talked about that. That's been a topic we've covered a lot because we're kind of in that thing where it's twofold. You want to get the positive messages out to the community, and then you also have to be open about when you have critical incidents and something happens. You want to be open and transparent on that stuff too. So it really kind of affects the law enforcement world in two ways: the fun stuff, the community engagement stuff, but then also, hey, we had something, an officer involved shooting or something happened. Let's get information out as much as we can so people feel like they're informed and we're not, hiding anything.
Right.
Yeah, I really don't think there's any level. Like, again, you guys, before we started this call, you guys were joking with each other. I imagine locker rooms and several police departments all over the country are very similar to what it was like when I played football in high school or when I was in the military and we were going to go fly. These locker rooms are full of humor and jovial nature. And if you expressed more of that and did so on social media and made it a human experience for people, I'm telling you, the narrative, guys, I don't know if you guys remember, Russia invaded Ukraine. Does anybody remember that?
Right, exactly. Right.
Everyone's completely forgot about that. Does anybody remember that when it happened?
Yeah, right. And it's still going on too, which is
crazy. No one gives a shit anymore. They get that whole generation completely forgotten about it. Now, the same situation here, right? We can make this, if you guys wanted to change the narrative, you can, but the way you're going to have to change the narrative, again, those officers who I see making that really funny content or the content where they're out there with the community or stuff like that, that stuff, like I would make the funniest, I would make videos about the officers making fun of other officers or like chasing down crackhead videos or just funny, I would make it as funny and relatable as to the point where like you're almost getting the administration, like the higher ups being like, I'm a little bit, that's the line you want to go to. Right. I'm serious. For me, I would go to the point where literally the chief is like, man, you are getting so many followers and I'm not quite sure this is the message we want. But like, that's the line you want to go to. If you guys do that and it becomes like, hey, I'm John the funny cop or whatever. By the way, the other narrative I would try to probably, like, even if you are a law and order, obviously you guys are police officers, so you are. But like, I would really try to stay away from like American flags, let's support Trump, and fucking country music in the background, because you're not speaking to your audience, the audience that you're trying to get to. That is not the audience that is sitting there trying to defund the police. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Because the problem is now, by the way, no one's a bigger fan of the United States of America than me, but the problem is when you do that, what you're doing is like, you're playing the stereotype. And I don't want to play the stereotype in these type of situations, right? I want these people to understand, hey, I'm coming out there. Again, if I was one of these individuals and I was out there playing basketball with some young kids, that to me is not playing the stereotype. That means I'm at least trying to reach out. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
That type of situation. So it's just like, I would not make it political in any way whatsoever, but I would make my commentary as human as possible. And I would try to make as much content as I could like that on TikTok and Instagram and, maybe Twitter if you want. And I would try to engage people in as fun, again, engaging people in a serious manner. We've tried that. We've done that. Okay. War on drugs. We tried that, guys. We tried that. Those things are like, they're not, no offense, that's not cool. And I know people are going to watch this and like, well, we don't care about being cool. Yeah, but you're not the one doing a B&E when you're fucking 16 years old. Those are the people that you guys are asking me about. And in order to change their minds, you're going to have to be memeable, shareable, funny, and viral. That is what's going to happen. And if you guys don't believe me, then we're just going to consistently have this disconnect between a young generation that is full of testosterone and anger and wanting to cancel people and then this other group of older established individuals that are only about law and order. And these people do not communicate with each other. And then we end up with the same situation over and over again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it kills a lot. And it kills a lot of cops. Kills a lot of cops. Cops get shot every single day. And a lot of that has to do with that fact. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like, I'm telling you from a psychological standpoint, if you wake up every day and you're following police officers on TikTok because they're making really, really funny, shareable content, the likelihood of you engaging in some kind of violent activity against them, it's just not likely. It is such a small psychological thing. But like, again, Are there other solutions? There are plenty of other solutions, but those solutions have been tried. It's above my pay grade to try to make cocaine legal. That's not what we're here talking about, right? Right. That's not what we're talking about. The criminal, we can talk about criminal reform, or we can talk about the privatization of jails, how that's worked out. This is not what we're talking about today. Right now, you guys are talking about the relations that people have with the police. And the reality of the situation is that stuff has to stop. But you can't, I don't think force is what stops it or has ever stopped it. Right. I think the thing that is going to change people's minds again is there has to be some level of connection made to that peer group. And the most viral way to do that is on social media. And because I've seen personally so many great examples of content where police officers are making really good content on TikTok and Instagram, and it's making them more, and they're becoming, online viral influencers and stars. I think that is the key. And just like we forgot about Ukraine, we're going to forget about the rest of this stuff. And we can go back to loving police officers. I think that is something that's
and that's another thing that we've touched on too, is that unfortunately the majority of stuff that you're seeing, the stuff that people put out on social media, is all the bad stuff that is happening, or the controversial stuff, where in reality, cops are out there doing great things,
of course,
100 times more good things than your one or two bad apples are doing things out there. And you got to get that message out there.
So Scott, I think what people need to hear, honestly, is that when those officers screw up, you as officers say, yeah, those officers screwed up. What I think people are worried about, so both these things are true. Those officers screwed up. 99% of officers are good. If both those things are true, the thing is, they need to hear both of those things. And the problem is, a lot of times, like, again, when someone says defund the police, of course it's absurd. But the thing is, when I hear that, I'm like, okay, let me address why you feel like you need to defund the police. And then let me explain to you why, when you do that, you're actually making yourself safer, and you're making the police less safe, and you're making yourself less safe from the police because you have poorly trained officers. This is completely counterproductive to the thing you think you want. Let me walk you through why that doesn't work. And there's no hate or derision in my voice. Okay. That's what I think people need. Right. And if you were to do something like that, then I think it would work. But what happens is, man, you have two groups of people that live in these echo chambers, and it's not helpful. Like, the echo chambers are one of I'm telling you right now, I had a socialist on my podcast the other day, and I have fucking Andrew Tate coming on in a couple of weeks. You could not have two completely different people. I have a woman who's writing a book on feminism, and I have some gentlemen who come on. I have with Rollo Tomasi coming on my podcast. They could not possibly be further from each other as far as what their beliefs are, because I don't live in an echo chamber, right? I don't live in an echo chamber.
It's your whole point about being able to have conversations.
Correct.
You gotta be able to listen to people who have opposing opinions to you.
Yes.
Or you don't solve anything.
Hey, I'll tell you one thing. I didn't vote for Biden or Trump. You know why? Because to me, a military officer or a police officer should have been president of the United States. I don't understand why I live in a country with 330 million people, and I have to choose between two 70-year-old men who have made racist comments and both been accused of sexual assault. Why are these my two choices? Right. Why can't I get a 2-star general with 2 PhDs who's started a business and run it successfully and put kids through college? Why can't I get that guy to be my president? Why do I have to settle for these two people? Again, when I say that, it's very unpopular to a lot of people. They're like, they don't want to hear that. Why? Because they live in an echo chamber, and their political candidate is always good. Believe women until you accuse Joe Biden. Then we don't believe women anymore. And then with Donald Trump, it's like, yeah, Donald Trump is great. And then he says things that are just objectively false. And you're just like, okay, neither one of these people is worthy of our vote. But yet this is what we're come down to choose. And when I say that, people are like, oh, that's just a cop-out. No, it's not. We deserve better. And part of the reason why we don't get better is because of this echo chamber society. I have friends of mine. I'm going on this podcast in a couple of months. Planet is really, really controversial podcast. And I know when I go on, I have several female friends who are going to be very upset with me that I went on this podcast. And it's just one of these situations where, like, yeah, you know, the message that you've been trying to spread, no one's listening to it, because it's an echo chamber. So if you guys go to a convention full of, like, law and order, right-wing individuals and start talking about, well, we need to stop this violence against police, Those are not the people who are conducting violence against the police.
Right.
You're back in your echo chamber where everyone's going to cheer and just go for. No, in order to evoke change, you have to leave your echo chamber and you have to speak to people who fundamentally might not agree with some of the things that you have to say. And the common language that you can find with those people, I found two of them. One of them is humor, and the other one is science. But humor, most definitely, when you use humor in those situations, you humanize individuals. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's like,
Absolutely.
to me, there is no other way. You did not grow up with the same experience that a kid growing up in a crack house in East St. Louis did. There's just no way for you to necessarily understand his experience. So how do we come together? Humor. I found that to be humor and camaraderie, especially amongst men, especially amongst a teammate. It's really hard to be a racist man if you've served in a military unit with African Americans and people of different ethnicities. It whips the racism out of you real quick when you see stuff like that. So for me, it's like one of these situations where, like, yes, are you guys right? Of course you're right. Now, do you want to win though? I was saying in MOA, do you want to win the argument or do you want to win? You could win. You could get to the ballot box. You could get your candidate in political office, and you still have a bunch of people out there who are committing crimes who feel completely disenfranchised. To me, I want to win. I want to win. I don't want to just win the argument. I want to win. So in order to do that, in order for me to affect change, I have to be able to speak to these people who do not agree with me. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I had flat earthers on my podcast for 3 hours and debated them. Right. And I went step by step trying to show them, guys, this is why this doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? But there was no hate in my voice. And so I know while that may not be as exciting, it's way more exciting to just espouse hate. Right. The reality is, or to have a very black and white type of opinion. The reality of the situation is you're not going to change anybody when you're speaking in an echo chamber.
Right. Because just like you said, I mean, we've tried, violence, we've tried hate. I mean, we've got to try something different because it just has to change on all sides. I think the truth has to be talked about. The truth has to be dealt with. And I think they're like, just like you said, humor might just be the middle ground where people just start talking, because then, if you could laugh at yourself and the other people could laugh at you and you can laugh at them. And then maybe the next step would be have, a conversation about how we make other changes.
Listen, man, people who follow each other don't tend to shoot at each other. I'm just saying, man, like I know it seems so vapid and shallow to an older generation, but the reality is, like, nobody wants to get shot. Like, we have to do something about this. And this younger generation of kids do not read books. They don't sit down and watch 30-minute television programs. They watch 15-second reels on Instagram. This is the only way to communicate with these individuals. And I've taken it, like, personally, I'm almost 45-year-old retired U.S. military officer. I was born in the 1970s. Come from a different generation. When I see this, sometimes I don't understand. My social media manager, she's younger than me, and she posts these reels that are 15 seconds long. They're just nothing reels, not maybe 90 seconds long, just very short clips and sound bites. And my engagement grows drastically. So whatever we're doing works. And I'm able to run a 7-figure business because of it. So I know this works. So if that's what works, then that's the only way I think to communicate with this, for lack of a better term, ADD generation. That's just what has to happen, right? And so the best way to communicate with them, again, I get recognized always on the street because of my podcast and because of the stuff that I post on my reels and my TikTok. In order for me to do that, I think if police officers were to do the same thing, you would get a very different reaction in certain neighborhoods because of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Chris, he does bring up a good point, because I have 3 sons and they're all, between the ages of 10 and 16. And each one of them has individually come up to me and said, Dad, you got to get on TikTok. You got to get on this, that. And I'm like, yeah, but what? Come on, get out of here. Like, you're a guy that fell asleep on a bag of Doritos last night and ground him up, and I got to clean him out of your bed, and I got to listen to you. But he's right. He's got a valid point. I mean, this is what these kids say. And case in point is just my own lab right here. All 3 of them came forward and said to me, and they all are just all day looking at that stuff. Now that can aggravate the crap out of me. And like I've said on other stories, we used to get mad when we talked about peer support and how these young guys needed to be able to get that stuff off of our chest, where we would just go home and eat it, become drunks, abusive, and die in our 50s. And we said, no, it's got to change. It's got to change. We said, all right, well, if this is the generation of guy that's coming to us, of officer that's coming to us, we got to get used to the fact that these people want a work-life balance. They want this, and we can dismiss it all we want, but look at where we're at for dismissing it. We can't get people to be police officers. So the point that he's making is exactly that. We've got to go out there and do this, as much as it's like completely foreign to me. And it's like, go back to the gray beard again. Like, how am I going to pull this off with people? Well, hey, if I don't try, I'm never going to.
They have filters for that.
Right. Exactly.
You can put like the dog ears on there.
Yeah.
So let's go back to what you said. Like, me personally, I make the decision to shake men's hand when I talk to them, look them in the eyes, and always, always, always keep my word. That's a decision I made
Yep.
personally to maintain my own level of integrity. The thing is, I have clients, and you guys have members of the community that you serve, and they don't all choose to behave or make the same decisions that I made. But the reality is we still have to deal with them. We still have to work with them. And even though they do things that we don't agree with, the idea that we're just going to just disagree, like overtly disagree with them, that's what leads to misunderstanding and then eventually violence. So that's one of these situations where it's just like, do I agree with it? Do I want to wear dog ears and wear these fucking filters on my face when I'm on? Of course I don't want to do that.
Right.
It's ridiculous, but I do it because it works. And to me, because I'm an entrepreneur, I have to do it for that same point. And the other thing is, like, I recruit for bikini competitions. The main girls I recruit are 22 years old. Like, there's no way they're going to like listen to long form content about. Do you know how many people? You know what's one of the craziest things? So I do a 2-hour podcast every week. And some of I do episodes on quantum mechanics. I do episodes on psychology. I do episodes with porn stars. I do episodes with Dan Bilzerian, Ty Lopez, Jay Cutler. I do episodes on steroids and testosterone. And I would say of my total impressions, I'd say 15% of it are people watching the podcast, and 85% of my impressions are people watching clips of my podcast on Instagram and TikTok. It's like 6 to 1. Let's say I get 3 million impressions a month. Like 2.5 million of those impressions or more are people watching 60, 30-second clips of my podcast because they have no attention span. Right. They don't communicate the same way that we do, where we would listen to like an entire episode of Joe Rogan. They can't do that anymore, or listen to an entire audiobook. They're just not functionally capable of that. So now, because I understand that, well, okay, what's the best way for me to communicate with those individuals? Let's communicate with them on their own terms. And the thing is, humor still works. Humor still works. It doesn't matter what the generation is, because humor is evolutionary, whereas TikTok is not. TikTok is cultural. The idea of humor is evolutionary. And so that's the reason why that whole thing works.
Wow.
And this is all stuff I'm sure that you cover in your course and everything too, right? So
Absolutely.
people can really kind of it's a full package of all these things. It's society, it's people's backgrounds, it's understanding all that. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically looking at all motivation through the eyes of evolutionary psychology, and then from that point being like, well, how is it that you obtain certain levels of status, right? So status is status is status. Like, if you are, again, we talked about this before, like, if I'm just trying to think of a famous person who doesn't do, not particularly, Ryan Seacrest. Look at Ryan Seacrest. Ryan Seacrest was an announcer who hosted TV shows. If the four of us try to get in front of a venture capitalist, or Ryan Seacrest try to get in front of the same venture capitalist, who would get in front of him first? Right. Obviously he would, right. Even though he's not in venture capital, he would, because he has more status than us. This is one of the points I teach in my program. We listen to individuals, like Mark Cuban makes statements about like high frequency trading when he has no idea what he's talking about. He does not, because I know, because I work for a hedge fund. He has no idea what he's talking about. But we listen to him because he has $5 billion. Right. And so my opinion, which is the reality of the situation, is the reason why you can trade your bid-ask spread when you trade SPY as 1 penny is because of high frequency trading. The reason why you're able to get filled at such a low price, or at such a good price, is because of high frequency trading. Mark Cuban doesn't understand that. And so because he doesn't, and he sit there and espouse, he's a 65-year-old man espousing that, we listen to him because he has $5 billion, and we don't listen to me, even though I trade for a living. So it's one of those situations where status is. I love using the Jake Paul example. Jake Paul, who could get in front of the president of the United States faster, us or Jake Paul? It's obvious, right? But Jake Paul is not a politician, but he could do it because he has more status than us.
That is
right. So that's it. So I teach these guys, it's like one of these situations where it's like, you want to affect change, you are going to have to gain some level of status. And in some people's minds, the way you do that is if they follow you on social media. And how do they do that? Because you create shareable, viral content that entertains them or engages them in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
I would make as many funny cop videos as possible. I would try to push the limit as far as I can. Those dude perfect videos where you guys, they're like throwing a ball over their head and trying to make it half court shot or whatever. There's one police officer who does like trick basketball shots. It's really, really good stuff. Stuff like that. I know it seems so small, but like the problem is like the issue is a lack of communication between two different groups of people. And this is probably the most key common denominator between them.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, we've been talking for a long time. We can go on and on and on and on, and this is great. And we'd love to have you back for sure, Mike. This is.
Oh, yeah. I'd love to. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be some good.
Hey,
content.
so I have a couple of questions for you guys.
Sure. Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah.
Police officers in general, you guys saw in so the legalization of marijuana. Were you guys in favor of it? Have you seen My estimation is when it was legalized in certain states that you would see the criminalization of it in certain places like Mexico and at the border go down. And that's exactly what we've seen. Do you guys agree with that? Do you think that worked out the way you thought it did? You think it's a better use of your time? You remember the NBA refs had to look at the 3-second rule and they got rid of the rule. It feels like it was a waste of your time to bust guys for marijuana.
Scott, you want to go on that one first? Cause you got the most backing.
Yeah. I mean, the way I guess the thing I probably had a problem with initially was the way that it was sold. Cause I think it was trying to be sold a certain way when I felt really what they were pushing was just a way to tax it and make more money off of it.
Sure.
I mean, I'm in Illinois, and the pitch that was made to it here was like, oh, it's going to be this great thing, and it's going to help all, people with different varying medical conditions. And it does. I mean, I'm not disputing that, but like, it was just, I felt like they were using that as an excuse to make money.
Yeah, they were flopping 100%. Yeah. But my whole thing was I felt like it was a waste of our resources as a criminal justice system to be going after people for smoking marijuana. I felt like there were so many worse things.
Yeah, but I think if you got to take it in context too, like, I mean, there's been times that, we caught somebody with a gram of weed or whatever, like, here, just, take it. It's not, for me, it wasn't so much the weed, what kids were doing or what people were doing to get it because they didn't have jobs. Then it was, they didn't know their limits, and they would, and they would do something stupid, just like drunk driving. It's the same thing. And so I just think it was more, I actually saw an increase in criminal activity for a while.
Really?
I saw an increase in the black market
because in the black market. Yeah.
Right. Well, here's what I think. In criminal activity in the black market, I saw an increase, and I don't know if people are going to agree with me, until people actually figured out that if I go pay the tax, that's less than going to jail, and I lose my weed. So I think once people started figuring out that go pay the tax and whatever, and you could have it legally. That's when that was my assumption, but I saw a spike, and then I saw a decrease. But for me, I was never one that was into drugs or whatever. And it was, to me,
I've never tried marijuana. I just felt like U.S. police officers, like, this is just one more thing that's going to, like, we're funding. It's one more source of revenue for the cartel, and one more thing that you guys have to worry about that I just don't think was. I'm not saying it's not deleterious. I just don't think it's worse than alcohol. I think alcohol is terrible, just as bad for people as marijuana. I'm gonna ask you guys another question. They're talking about certain places in Oregon where they're going to, in certain areas, legalize things like cocaine. What do you guys think about that? Is that too? Do you guys remember The Wire? You remember they had a place called Amsterdam and Baltimore where they basically anything was legal as long as you stayed on that one city block. Yeah. Do you guys think that what kind of effects do you think something like that would have?
To me, I think the issue with that is that as police officers, I mean, we can think what we want, but we got to go with what the law says and kind of work it from there. And we have this great thing called discretion. Back to when we were talking about weed, like I was like, I can do what I want with weed as long as it's illegal. But at the same sense, I also have discretion it's on me to learn better about this person and why they might be smoking weed and what the situation may be and what I can do with that. If the DEA can say, we're not even going to come out and look at anything under 2,000 pounds of weed, that's a tremendous amount of weed, but they're not even going to come out and look at it, and they're going to let the locals deal with it. The way I look at the situation with drugs on that level is I can think what I want, and I can say, hey, this is what this could amount to. But the people that are in charge, the people that elected those folks, say, this is what we're going to do. And I have to deal with it. You know what I mean? I have to be able to deal with it. And I have to look at the bigger issue as to why would a person need that? Because that's not good for them to do it. Like anything else, in excess is the problem. We particularly saw it with heroin. And when we had a heroin problem in the Chicago area, what parents started doing was because they didn't want their kids to die from heroin. They were like, well, give them Narcan. Well, we'd bring these kids back from Narcan, and there was no consequence for using the Narcan. Like, we didn't get them in mandatory rehab or even trying to do it. We would take prostitutes and put them in all sorts of prostitution, and these girls would be at these events through the courts of calling up Johns, so it wasn't worked. It was oversight, people doing what they thought was feeling good because they didn't want to really look at a lot of the issues that surrounded why does somebody become addicted. We didn't want to understand that. We just wanted to jam people. Now, it does create crime and things like that. But the bottom line is like, and I used to say to people, okay, well, Narcan saves the white kid that rolled down from the suburbs to buy heroin on the west side of Chicago. Yeah. That kid dies and drives back down there and gets heroin again. That doesn't solve the gang problem in Chicago between the two black kids. that have to live. And the only economy that they have is narcotics.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to address the issues that really impact Black communities. And to me, I was like, look, we execute, we have discretion. We have to dig a little deeper as cops to say, why is this really happening? Is this person really a bad person as to what they're doing? I saw more people killed over weed. Scott, correct me if I'm wrong. Where we worked than I did over any other drug, because weed was always money, and people killed each other over money, not the weed.
Right. Yeah.
And the guy pushed a lot of weed, had a lot of money.
And we worked narcotics for a long time. And to Sean's point, like with heroin, I mean, I guess it's like, where do you start to go? What do you continue to say is okay, and and creating safe spaces to use these kind of drugs? I mean, we've seen so many young people overdose, essentially die and get brought back, or young kids who they were stealing and selling all their parents' stuff. And, a lot of parents wanted to get them treatment and came to us for help to say, what do we do to get them away from this? I had a very good friend who died from a heroin overdose. Yeah. So like, I don't, to me, like the weed thing, it's become a little more watered down. And, I see I see both sides of that. But like when you start getting into these hard drugs, I don't think it's productive. I don't think it really does anything to help anybody just by creating more. I think we should be doing, to Sean's point, we should be doing more to, I agree with, like trying to get treatment for these people. And maybe part of the punishment, and I'm always in favor of this, is like get into some kind of treatment, and maybe that will lessen the punishment. You know what I mean? Like, let's do something positive to try to help get these people away from it, as opposed to,
I live in a city, I live in Las Vegas, where extremely affluent individuals choose of their own volition to do drugs, and like a lot of drugs. And one of the situations where, the way I see it, and again, you guys are bringing up great points about individual communities. Because my family's Colombian, so I do see this from more of a macroeconomic view. The reality of the situation is, I really think the way you defund those individuals is, while I'm not the biggest fan of Johnson & Johnson or Dow Chemical, I'd rather have them making it than Pablo Escobar. So like that to me, like that's one of the things that we take a lot of the power away from those individuals who are creating, like, again, the murder capital of the Western Hemisphere was Ciudad de Juarez at one point, and then it was Tijuana, right? And then the other murder capitals were like Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and it was all tied to drugs. It was all tied to the transport of illegal narcotics. And so to me, again, the marijuana thing, to me, I'm in favor of. The cocaine thing, I'm not really sure. That's why I wanted to ask you guys about, because I do know in some places in Oregon, they're going to try to pass laws or maybe they already have. I don't know if the federal government is going to come shoot it down, but the intention was to have certain zones in Oregon, or it was in Washington, I forget, where you can take cocaine, or you can do cocaine as long as it's regulated and as long as it's in this certain area. The other thing I want to ask you guys about, as officers, once you guys get into your 40s, is it a common practice for, now, again, I'm not going to take it to this level, but Dan Bilzerian came on my podcast and was very, very open about the fact that guys in special ops take steroids. And this is something I've kind of knew under the rug. I didn't realize to the certain level that it was, but to me, if you were going to ask me, do I think it's okay if a guy who is going to go do a clandestine mission to try to serve his country in extremely dangerous territory, if I have a problem if this guy's taking Anavar and fucking testosterone, I do not have a problem with it. Not whatsoever. These guys are the tip of the spear, and if they're doing it for country, I don't have an issue with it. I am curious, do you guys find police officers, once they get like in their late 30s, early 40s, do they turn to TRT? Is that something that you guys have seen recently, or something that you've seen happen before?
No, the only thing that I've seen recently is guys in their 40s actually going to the doctor to get their testosterone levels taken.
Yeah.
Or seeing that. I've seen more of that from.
But they're not getting on TRT?
I'll be honest, they do get medication. I've never asked what they,
So usually if you're on TRT and your testosterone gets like below 300, 200, they're going to put you on exogenous testosterone. It's a testosterone cypionate, which is an injection you'll do once or twice a week. And then it's made from grapeseed or sometimes from yams. And it gets your testosterone levels back to where they were when you were like 20, 22 years old. That's essentially, I'm curious because it's something that's grown exponentially in this country in the last decade. There's like 12 million men on TRT now.
Yeah, but
Really?
it doesn't really, it wasn't even special ops. It's just guys my age that felt like tired or lost
Yeah.
their sex drive or
Well, I
whatever.
mean,
And
I haven't
it
been
just,
in SWAT for 17 years and seeing that. And I was old when I got involved in it because I didn't come in law enforcement until I was
So
in my
when you were in
30s.
SWAT, you didn't think any of the guys again, I obviously don't want you to tell anybody, but you didn't think any of those guys were taking roids? You didn't think any of the guys you were serving with
I
taking
had
roids?
no honestly tangible proof of it, and I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
why. I didn't, and I
Okay.
never
Yeah.
did. I never had a affection for it. I didn't have the body or anything like
Yeah.
that to think like that I was going to do that. But I was in my 40s, and half the guys on the team I could beat in some of the physical fitness aspect of it. I'm like,
Yeah.
so if you're taking it, you're getting bad shit. You know what I mean? So but the thing is that I one of the things that we all had to do is we had to take annual physicals, and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff might show up in those high counts. And if that got
No,
back, you'd be
not usually.
booted.
If you take testosterone Cipodate, it's not going to show up. There's nothing.
Okay,
it's just
all
going to show that you have a higher testosterone level. So I think
I know
Yeah.
so little about it. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't honestly say unequivocally. There were some guys that, you looked at and said, man, he looks like he's juicing, but
right.
we had no proof
Yeah.
of it. And honestly, a lot of us really didn't go that route. I mean, a lot of us saw that as, I'm going to be honest, just my experience with it. A lot of those guys that did that shit got injured quite a bit. And that
Really?
took them off the team. Like,
Yeah, that's definitely possible, yeah.
I'm testosterone. Testosterone's already like, look what it does to boys. I have 3 of them. It's just like, Jesus,
Right.
right. Survive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then like, all right, I'm going to bench 500 pounds. Okay. Well, now I just ripped my shoulder out and I can't
Yeah.
hold the shield up. I'm not going to do that. I would rather hold the shield up.
So
And you got skinny rails like me that, can go 17 years without any significant injuries. And you know what I mean? It's like, I'd say most of the guys, I'm going to be honest with you, I had never heard it openly talked about because you know how it is. Like you just get there and you're at lunch and I was on regional teams, which took guys from SWAT teams all over the region. And we're talking a densely populated area from where we were from. And that stuff never came up. People weren't like, oh yeah, he's juicing, or look at him. I mean,
So-
people would joke. It's more about how much tattoo ink they could handle probably than anything else. You know what I mean?
So the there's 2 different things, and a lot of people don't realize this part of it because it's definitely changed my life. There is the legal aspect of it, which is testosterone cypionate. Some people can take anabar. They're going to give you estrogen blockers, and there's this stuff called HCG, which prevents testicular atrophy. There's tens of millions of people on this. It's completely legal. You can go to any TRT clinic, and they'll do this for you immediately. Then there's the anabolic side. This is trenbolone, this is trenbolone, Deca, all these other things. These are illegal steroids. This is the guy who bench presses 500 pounds, who gets really greasy, who has the fucking veins on his neck that look like water hoses. His hair starts falling out and he gets violent. This is anabolic steroids versus androgenic testosterone. Androgenic testosterone is TRT, and that's what guys are on. The anabolic steroids is the stuff that like where guys are, just getting humongous. And it was just interesting to me listening to Bilzerian talk about it. He's like, yeah, the guys in the teams a lot of them weren't taking steroids. It was very common. So I was just interested to see it was, something
like
you
I
guys
said,
had to
I
deal with.
mean, for me, I just, because we used to talk about, magazines and, scotch, and now we're talking about the testosterone levels.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the age.
My PSAs. Let's talk about
you're
those real quick. You know what I mean? Let's talk about those things. Why is it so high?
Nice.
Why isn't it supposed to be high? You do
do-
what that
do you-
thing goes is that they go up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Do you guys do any formal training when it comes to like cluster B personality disorders? Like guys, like actual psychopaths, do you guys do anything profiling or any kind of training like that?
We have started over the last couple of years. We have started. I don't want to say it's like a profiling psychopaths or whatever, but it's profiling individuals, and we're just getting more and more tools to identify different things. Like, like years ago, some guy didn't listen to you. You'd slam him to the ground, and because there's the fights on or whatever. Now, you're learning to take out a pad of paper because maybe he's autistic and he's not verbal, but he could draw. Well, 15 years ago, you would think the fight's on, he's not complying, like, okay, you're taking the custody a little rougher. Today, you give him a pad of paper and he's like, no, I'm good. My feet hurt or whatever. So I think we're getting more.
Yeah.
I don't want to go.
I think at the street level, we're not.
Yeah,
we're not doing as much of that as
sociopath
as the street level stuff where, we get a lot of training. Mental health has definitely become a big thing in law enforcement. And so we're definitely trying to get a lot more in tune with mental health and like both the people that we deal with and our own mental health at times too. So, maybe not anything specific to that, but we are definitely, I think law enforcement generally is taking a much more positive approach to mental health and how to deal with people that are maybe, the same people that we're dealing with over and over again, or people that, before you just like, hey, I'm going to this house again. Now is where it's like, hey, what can we maybe do to try to provide some resources for this person,
Yeah. Dude, I would highly recommend The Murderer Next Door by Dr. David Buss. Such a great book. It's something like 78% of murders are men killing other men over women, like worldwide, not just like in US cities. But
What was the name of that book again?
It's called The Murderer Next Door by Dr. David Buss. It's fantastic. So that's initially what he got into, was the study of homicide. And then from that, he switched to evolutionary psychology. He started studying, because that's essentially that's what murder comes from. Murder is an evolutionary adaptation. I know it seems crazy. It seems incredibly barbaric, but for the majority of our existence, we lived in nomadic tribes. And that was the solution that was a very effective and permanent solution to several problems, was murder. So it was homicide. So that's the reason why it's in our, it's a really crazy book. At the very end of the book, people ask the question, why is there so much murder in the world? And his question is, why isn't there more? Like, when you actually look at people's behavior,
we
it's
live
really
in a safer time than we ever has in our history.
Again, Stephen Pinker wrote a book about that was also very like offensive to a lot of people. It's like, yeah, this is the healthiest, safest time ever, with the actual lowest levels of police brutality, and people get offended when you say that. And so those type of things are very inconvenient for their narrative. But when you show them statistics that they don't agree with, then that also becomes that's what my show is. You guys want to know, my podcast is about statistics that make people uncomfortable. 80% of divorces are initiated by women, stuff like that. Like, people don't like these, they don't like these terms because it doesn't fit with their narrative, but there's science behind them, which makes a lot of people upset whenever they see that kind of stuff. And there was I can't remember, what was it? There was one other question I want to ask you guys, but I don't remember. Anyway, I can't
next time, because there will be a next time.
Right.
So Mike, give your podcast and your coaching thing one more time.
Yeah. So the podcast is the Michael Sartain podcast. You can find it everywhere on Apple. You can find it on Spotify, YouTube, and then you can find clips of it on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. You can find the clips on there. A lot of people, they just want to watch the funny clips that are like 90 seconds long. But I would recommend you guys check me out on YouTube. That's probably the best way to watch it. And then as far as my coaching program, it's moamentoring.com, moamentoring.com. If you guys go in there, you're going to see like a sales video that's about of BSL. It's about 7 minutes long, and it's going to go over the different parts of the program. And then you will see 50 testimonials from my clients. Like I said, I have never had a legitimate, I have had some guy try to rip me off. It was like right at 30 days. He was like, oh, I want a refund. And it was like, he was taking the course and stealing shit. But I've never had a legitimate request for a refund from this program. And like I said before, I think we're at somewhere between 340 and 370 clients that we're going on now. We've gone just under 2 months. Or 2 years that we've been doing the program, and it's worked out really, really well. I've been able to help a lot of people. So you guys are interested in that, and ladies too. I do have a rule with the ladies. The way it works is you can come and join the program for free, but you have to show me that you're actually serious about learning about the program. If you do, we actually give you the program for free, because I do want more women in the program. I do want them respected. Right. So just like a bar, guys got to pay, ladies get in free.
I was gonna say, it's just like that's from your DJ days too, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, it all comes full circle.
Thunder,
ladies get in free. So yeah, those are two main things. As far as the podcast, I'm trying to find like an FBI profiler. That's kind of the next thing that I'm looking for. I've had way too many porn stars on recently. A lot of crazy social media. You guys never even asked me the influencer question. I remember you guys were going to ask me about that.
Well, describe to our listeners what an influencer actually does.
So ready? So here's your TikTok clip. Ready? Some of you hear the term influencer and you start thinking, this is a term for young people who do not have a job, who just want to sit around and post on social media, that aren't real models, that aren't real entrepreneurs, that are just like come up with some word to make themselves relevant when they aren't doing anything. That may be what you think. And you're completely fucking correct. That is exactly what it is. For the vast majority of people, I'm what would be called a micro influencer, because I don't have millions of followers. So I'd be what called a micro influencer, but I don't call myself an influencer. To me, I'm an entrepreneur. I run a 7-figure business that comes off of my social media. So because of that, I would say I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a coach. I don't call myself an influencer. Now, I do have some friends, like I would say Ty Lopez, Dan Bilzerian, Lindsay Payless, Emily Sears. Those are actual influencers. Those people have 4, 5, 6 million, 32 million followers on social media. When they do stuff, they can run massive businesses. Bilzerian's now the CEO of a publicly traded company because of their social media influence, that's definitely another thing they can do. But a girl with 100,000 followers can actually make a living now selling like fit tea or pre-workouts or, you know, like workout gear or stuff like that.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
essentially there was a void and a word needed to be created so that these people who are essentially, you know, most of them do nothing. I'm just gonna be honest with you. Most of them do absolutely nothing. And they want to imagine that they're celebrities when they're not, or successful, or again, the word entrepreneur used to mean something back in the 80s and 70s. It means absolutely nothing now. Entrepreneur means I take my investors' money and then I go to Tulum. That's what entrepreneur means. I tell my sales team, I don't ever want you to use the word entrepreneur or influencer anywhere in my sales copy. I hate those words because they've been perverted. They've been like a bunch of grifters and scam artists use those words now. For me, coach is I'll coach or instructor. I'm fine with that. Those things I'm fine. Teacher, I'm okay with that word. Professor, I'm okay with, but I'm not okay with the word. I never use the word influencer or entrepreneur because again, those words have meanings and people don't use those meanings correctly. So I don't like those words. But that's essentially what it means. And if you guys want to know, like, where, you know, what does it come from? There are a lot of people who can make a lot of money doing stuff online. And then there's a lot of people who just buy a bunch of Instagram followers. There's the one guy, God, I wish I could show it to you. He goes, I'm one of the richest guys in the world. And like all of his jewelry is fake. Everything this guy does is completely fake. And he keeps talking about how rich he is. And this is an example of narcissistic personality disorder. And you start to see one of the great or bad things about social media is that you can clearly see the psychopaths and the narcissists much more clear now because of the way they use social media. And so I find it to be like a pretty massive advantage. People will tell you what they are very quickly. You know, I always tell people, none of this is about me. I'm always trying to serve other people. I don't even introduce myself in my fucking podcast anymore. Like it's never about me. It's always about the guest. I always, because I see so many people that are just like scam artists and like everything is just self-aggrandizing nonsense. And I really, really try to go away from that. However, I will tell you that like when we go back to eyeballs, when people were watching Tom Brokaw,
right.
And Dan Rather, that's gone. There's no more of that anymore.
No.
Not some of those eyeballs. All of those eyeballs are now watching reels and TikToks. All of them. That's it. Even grandma, she's watching cat videos on YouTube. Like that's all of it.
Right.
It's true.
All of it has moved. And so whenever somebody approaches me about cable TV stations or print advertising or billboards are still fine, or magazines, I'm always like, no, I'm sorry. What we call traditional media, none of that works. The only thing that really still works is radio, but radio only works because it's now being converted into podcasts and streaming. That's the only reason why radio still works. But the rest of it is just like, even news, like nobody watches the news anymore. Nobody watches Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless anymore. They watch clips of Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless on Facebook. That's all they watch. So we're just in a very different time. I don't know if you guys have seen the condensed version of games on fucking NFL.com now. That's all I watch. I watch games in like 25 minutes. It's pretty incredible. And like people just don't have attention spans for anything anymore.
Right. What were we talking about?
We're gonna have to
exactly.
Right. We're gonna have to
That's a great assessment. Yeah.
We're just influencers. Yeah. If you guys ever have any questions or want me to reach out to anybody for you, I definitely could. I would love to. I'm going to ask Bilzerian if you come on. That would be the craziest thing ever. If you guys, because he's very, very, very pro police departments. You know, he was in the Navy. Very controversial individual. If you guys want 10,000 subscribers in one day, that would be a great way to get them.
That'd be awesome.
Get you up, Chris. Awesome. There you go.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Hey guys, when you post this, let me know, and I'm gonna have my team make like 20 clips out of this.
Awesome.
That's great, man. I really appreciate your time, man.
And then we appreciate your time and thanks for that. And then we're gonna definitely have you back on, and then I will be in touch with you via email for some other ideas I have.
For sure.
I appreciate it. And then everybody, please go where you get your podcast, download, subscribe to Michael's and our podcast. We really want to try to spread the word. Trying to make this world a better place with people so they have the right knowledge and the right answers. Thanks, guys.
For sure.
Thank you.
See ya.
Take care.